Hi, you're watching Bread and Roses, a weekly political social television magazine that's broadcast in Iran via New Channel TV in Persian and English. I'm Mariam Namazi and I'm presenting this week's program with my fantastic co-host Freret Puya.
Hello from me.
In this week's program, we're going to be discussing what's wrong with multiculturalism. Well, we think quite a bit is wrong with it, and we'll discuss why. We have an interview with the wonderful French secularist and author Caroline Freret. We'll also have shocking news of the week. This week will be on the CIA's torture report. And as usual, the insane fatwa of the week, which will be on ISIS's guidelines on how to capture and rape female slaves. But before we go into this program, let's listen to a short background clip on the main topic at hand. Stay with us. Multiculturalism as a social policy divides and segregates people into homogeneous communities and societies and ignores dissent, class politics and social movements. It has been instrumental in the rise of the religious right and militarism and in the justification of rights violations in the name of tolerance. Well, obviously, when we're speaking about the issue of multiculturalism, I think it is really important to talk about the fact that this is not about being opposed to living in societies with lots of different people, different immigrants. I mean, that's the beauty of, I think, many of our societies. Most societies today are very plural, and that's, a very positive aspect of many of our societies. What we're talking about here is multiculturalism as a social policy, which basically boxes people in, huge numbers of people into so-called communities or societies and looks upon them as homogeneous without really seeing all the sorts of fights and dissents and struggles that are taking place within those communities, So it, for example, will look at the Islamic regime of Iran and say Iran is an Islamic society, whereas clearly that's not the case.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it has two, you could analyze it on two fronts or two levels you could analyze this. One is the philosophical sort of level that, what does that mean for human society? The other thing is that it's a political framework that we've seen with the rise of the political Islamic movement that actually justified, as you, and it was mentioned earlier in the introductory comment, it justifies accepting certain behavior and defines those in advance and pigeonholes people into those situations. We've seen that with the rise of political Islam to justify putting certain people in the immigrant communities, for example, in Europe, into boxes and say, this is where you belong, and then have 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, a number of boxes for people to behave, and you have to behave according to those. And it actually undermines individual rights, and we've seen the consequences, and very effectively the Islamic or the religious right as well as Islamic groups, they've used multiculturalism as a framework or as a framework to advance the interest in European societies and in countries like Iran, the actually states using multiculturalism to push back any demand for human rights.
I think it's interesting, though, when you look at the concept of multiculturalism, you have people on the right who, blame many of societal woes and problems and ills, as well as the rise of the religious right, on immigrants. So they see immigrants as a homogeneous group, or Muslims. And you have people who consider themselves progressive who will also see Muslims as a homogeneous group, and therefore think that it's a defense of immigrants to side with the religious right and Islamists. And, there's fundamentally a problem there, because what happens is that it doesn't see, there's a sort of racism there, because it doesn't see the other sort of communities and societies as being as diverse as European societies, for example.
Absolutely, and often also within European societies it starts pigeonholing people. I mean, that's a retreat. So actually, multiculturalism, it's a framework. is a social policy. It's quite new in a way. Although everybody could go that the roots of it go to the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, but as a dominant form of political framework is in late 20th century and beginning of the 21st century, and that's is been used by both European governments to pigeonhole people and reduce rights, fragment rights, and by the dictatorships to fend off or defend the position and any attempt to improving the human rights. It's like, okay, this is our religion, this is our state, and you behave according to yourself and we behave according to ourselves. That's why, for example, in Iran, there is Islamic Human Rights Commission. That's a direct result of multiculturalism, because the Islamic regime would say, actually, well, we have a different standards for human rights and we do not accept universal human rights. I mean, these are the dangerous result of multiculturalism, and I think to some extent we need to recognize that the tide is turning.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop you there now. Let's now go and listen to an interview with Caroline Freret, and we'll be back to discuss this further. Stay with us.
The challenge we've got is that very often, in the name of multiculturalism, people of good faith, let's say people who don't want to discriminate or being racist, are tolerating actually the most violent extreme right, the most xenophobic, sexist, homophobic extreme right, which is a religious one, but still an extreme right. And I think the problem of that is that they are confusing many, many things. First, multiculturalism is not multicultural. Multicultural is the way we are living all together. It's a reality. We are dealing with pleasure with society full of diversity. It's absolutely not a problem. The problem is where some politicians are trying to use the religious identities of some citizens to win vote, basically. And in doing that, they are confusing in the same religious identity people who can be very secularist for equality, for example, between men and women, and people who want to kill people who are doing blasphemy, people who want to kill gays, people who want to kill Jews, or just having a very hatred speech about them. So by doing that, by this confusion in the name of respecting the religious identities of some citizens, they are just ignoring the huge battle was going on between the secularists and the fanatics inside every religion. And especially if we're speaking about Islam, we have to understand that Europe today is becoming the last refuge for many Iranian activists, Algerian activists, Egyptian activists, all brave people who just face a very a big threat under their life just because they are claiming to defend equality and the right to speak. They escape from that danger to come to Europe to live in peace, to live respecting equality and secularism. And there, some politicians and sometimes some journalists are telling them that they should be respectful for the people who want to kill them or destroy their own original countries. This is the confusion we're living with. And it's quite simple to go out of it. It's just to stop, to look the world with a cultural or religious view and look at the people for what they are fighting for, what is their ideas, what is their values. And if you consider people regarding their minds and not their faces, then first you stop to being really the real racism, because exotism is a racism. And secondly, you will go back to the path of universalism and secularism, which is, at the end, the only system who can guarantee equality for all, freedom of speech for all, and a living together. That means that you cannot divide the fight for secularism with the fight for universalism or equality of gender and etc. It's all the same. And the reason why this fight is absolutely, and I'm optimistic about, is that in the society of people who want to divide people regarding their religion, which is exactly what the theocracy are doing. If you look in the theocracy, not only the atheists, not only the free minds are oppressed, but also the religious minority everywhere. The only system who guarantee both freedom of speech, equality, the right of blasphemy, but also the right of express your religion without touching the right of the others, is secularist system. And why secular systems are going to win anyway is just because they are the best system for all. This is the place where all can live together, while the system that some minority in Europe want, or some majority in other countries want, like theocracy, is just the best guarantee for evil and for being very unhappy, except you're looking exactly the same as the most fanatics. So in their life, in their system, there is only happiness for the most radical intolerant. In secularist system, there is happiness and peace for everyone. And this is why secularism is definitely the most, the system with the most great future in front of it, at the condition of not confusing tolerance with tolerating the intolerant. The original confusion of multiculturalism came from some academics, actually, who want to please some politicians also in justifying their clientelism, communitarian clientelism. In the name of diversity or respecting diversity, they just erase the ideological battle, debate, and replace it by a very naive politic who is, we respect every culture, every religion, but who actually is working as blocking every individual in that identity and ignoring again what is the actual fight of ideas, which is one of the most important of this century, which is the battle not between religion, not between civilization, but the battle between ideals, secularism, or theocracy. So it's just, I think it's just people who are not thinking. You have some who want, again, to do this communitarian clientelism, so they want to see every community, every religious community, or because they are the most organized in a society, sometimes also the most funded. The politicians find that it is quite easy to consider the citizen this way by the religious identity. Some other is more because they're afraid to appear racist or this really problematic word, which is Islamophobic. The problem of the word Islamophobic, who have been used so many times, sometimes by good faith, but sometimes really to kill the debate about fanatism. It has been used by many fundamentalists to try to confuse the right of criticizing a religion, and especially when it goes to religious extremism, with a racism against believers, a racism against Muslims, a racism against any religious minorities, which is absolutely not true. I mean, you can be feminist, secularist, and strongly anti-racist, but we need to continue to criticize dogma when it is even a religious dogma. If not, we're not living in a free society anymore. If not, the most intolerant, racist, xenophobic, homophobic, and sexist people are going to win. So this is why we should not, again, confuse multicultural and multiculturalism, who mean doing public policy who are making a division between citizens in the name of their religion, true or false religion, because sometimes people are considered as, for example, Muslim while they are not. Even they are coming from Muslim country, they cannot be believer, they can be atheist. And go to a universalist political approach, which is one law for all the same, no matter you're coming from a religion or another country. Once you're living in this European country, it's one law for all, for women and men, and for every citizen, no matter their origin. It is just one of the basic principles of living together, actually. Myself, I think it's now almost 18 years that I'm working on extremism. I started by working on the far-right extremism, the racist extremism, the National Front, for example, in France. I moved to work on the Christian fundamentalism, and then I started to work on any fundamentalism, including Muslim fundamentalism. At the moment I started to work on Muslim fundamentalism, I've been accused of being Islamophobic. No matter if I am an anti-racist activist, no matter if I always and continue to challenge the National Front, for example, on the question of racism against Muslims. At the moment, I criticize people like Tariq Ramadan, for example, which is one of the representatives of the Muslim Brother ideology in Europe. All the Muslim Brother network, which is a fundamentalist one, which is absolutely not a progressist one, started to attack me. And my way to try to clarify those debates is that you have two ways, actually. There is many people who think that because there is racism, and there is racism, and actually this is one of my major concerns those days, there is racism against Muslims in Europe. But because of that, some people think they should not speak too much about fundamentalism and what is going on. I think it's absolutely wrong. I think it's more than wrong. You cannot justify totalitarianism just because there is racism. But on the opposite way, there is people who think that because there is this big danger, that there is fanaticism everywhere, they should tolerate some confusion, like confusing secularist Muslim with actually the people who want to kill them, which is the Islamists. I think the only way is to battle, of course, against both confusion and to fight strongly against racism and fight strongly against fanatism and fight strongly to say that we have the right to criticize not only fanatism but religion as itself, as ideology, but we never let people think that they can confuse this right of criticizing religion with being racist against believers. And it is a very important clarification. So instead of ignoring a danger because there is another danger, you just have to fight two dangers in the same times. It's a very hard job, but for example, Algerians did it for many years, fighting an authoritarian regime and fighting the totalitarian Islamist opposition in the same times. It's one of the most difficult things to do, but we have to learn from them that we can do it in Europe in a very much more comfortable context. We can do it. We have to do it. Basically, what we can do those days, what I'm trying to do myself is just clarify the terms in the public debate. So I'm both journalist, what we call in France a committed intellectual. That means that I'm using words as a weapon. I'm using the precision of the words to win this battle. So I'm clearly an activist in the sense of I have very simple values like secularism, equality for all, but I will defend those very simple values for all very strongly. And if it is being an activist of saying so, then I am an activist. But my only weapons are the precision of the words I'm using and I'm wishing to share with people in the public debate. I think it's really inspiring and we're all very enthusiastic about this conference because what we do realize, speaking together and crossing each other, is that we are all fighting in the same direction since now more than, for certain, 30 years, 15 years. We clarify ourselves in the same way that we are both anti-racist and secularist. And it is really pleasant to finally say, yes, we are on the same camp, because we are sometimes so isolated in our own country. We could be UK, it could be France, it could be Sweden, it could be for some Iran, Algeria. And the fact that we know that we are so similar actually in our wishes and also in what is so difficult when we try to defend our values. We have so the same enemies, we have so the same problems, but we also the same soul in somehow, because we really try to go in the same direction. It makes us feeling better, the fact that it is not utopia, or at least it is utopia we can achieve, that makes a lot of people dreaming about. So this is what it's about. Of course, we don't have the money of the fundamentalists. They have Qatar, they have many countries who are sponsoring them to do many symposiums, many marketing work, etc. We are missing that, but we have the ideas and we have the words and we have the energy, and we're very happy to share this moment together.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to you.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Caroline Freret. I think she raises some really interesting points. And of course, one of them was the fact that there are all these people fleeing from, let's say, Iran or Algeria, coming to Europe and being told that they can't criticize the very movements that have threatened to kill them or that are destroying their countries.
And I think it's, as you said, I know I'll go on for too long, Marianne, but I can just make this point very briefly. I think the problem with multiculturalism is that when people are, for example, fleeing somewhere, automatically associates those people with, you know, what they're fleeing from. I think that's quite important. And it doesn't allow people to criticize each other, for example. It doesn't allow society to be critical, because you need to respect that, because the state requires those characteristics as a means of control. And that's the problem with it. I think the solution is, just to be very brief, I know you like me to be brief, but the solution is for the society to recognize individual rights, individual contribution, and that people change as well all the time. People are continuously changing.
I think the reality is, and that's the whole beauty of the concept of citizenship rights, individual rights, is recognizing people not as groups, not as communities, not as religions and cultures, but as individuals and as citizens. And, you know, there is a racism there where you consider anyone who's other as having, all of them having the same views, and in the same way that a white British male does not necessarily represent Enlightenment values. He could be a member of UKIP or the English Defence League or Sharia Watch. On the other hand, not everyone who is Muslim or from Iran or from, you know, Tunisia is necessarily pro-Sharia and an Islamist. There are so many struggles that are taking place, and this isn't recognized when people are boxed into groups like this.
And I agree, and I think that's been destructive, and people recognize that. I think it is an element of, I was trying to say earlier on, the tide is turning. People have recognized that multiculturalism is failed, and people's contribution needs to be recognized from different parts of the society.
Yeah, but what worries me is that sometimes there's a lot of people on the far right that are opposed to multiculturalism for all the wrong reasons, because they're anti-immigrant, and they themselves criticize multiculturalism, but they only see immigrants as a homogeneous group as well.
Absolutely, I think they associate multiculturalism with the immigrants,
Yeah.
and recognizing the immigrants' community right, because people have been stopped criticizing what there is, and I think that's a reaction you're going to have. So to have a decent society, you need to break out of multiculturalism. At the same time, fight racism as well. That's important.
Yes. Tell us what you think about these very important issues. Let's now go to the shocking news of the week. The shocking news of the week was actually recommended to us by one of our viewers who asked us to cover this issue. And obviously, many of you will have heard of the report on the CIA's torture post-September 11th. Now, when you hear, and you read about the tortures that have taken place, it is really gruesome, you know. From waterboarding to rectal feeding to making people stand on broken limbs for hours upon hours. Real, unbelievable forms of torture.
And I think you could see that there is, this is the true face of militarism. Now it's broken out. In reality, they are still carrying on in one way or another. It happens that the cover is broken out and it's been removed for people to see the reality of part and the reality of CIA operations, which is part and parcel of United States militarism. So people oppose United States militarism. There are reasons for that.
Yeah, and I mean, in a sense, when we talk about, U.S. militarism being the other side of the coin of Islamism, I mean, you can see a lot of the similarities, in this sort of torture. And in a sense, people will look at this and say, well, it's a couple of bad seeds, rotten seeds that have done this. The reality is that this is institutionalized, this sort of dehumanization of the so-called enemy.
But Cheney doesn't think this is a bad seed. He's
exactly.
defending it.
Yeah,
I mean, today he's come out and, a couple of days ago, or was that today, or a couple of days ago, he came out in favor of this. He said, there's too much ha-ha and hoo-hoo about this. And, there hasn't been anything wrong, really. I don't, everybody knows this is not just a bunch of bad apples. It's a systemic issues. Guantanamo Bay is not, just a couple of rouge operators. Abu Ghraib prison, rogue operators.
Rouge?
And, couple of friends. Guantanamo, as well as Abu Ghraib in Iraq. These are systemic.
Yeah, systemic. And I think you can make a link between the way that young black men are being killed in America, for example, shot on the streets. These are really institutionalized, sort of dehumanization of those that are deemed to be the enemy or the other, really.
Yeah.
Anyway, tell us what you think about this report. We'll try to discuss it in more depth in one of our main interviews. Let's now go to the insane fatwa of the week. Now, I'm sure all of you have heard, or you most probably have heard, that ISIS has their Fatwa department has issued guidelines on how to capture, keep and rape slave women. And in this guidelines, it talks about who you can capture and who you can have sex with, including children that have not yet reached the age of puberty, as long as they're fit.
I mean, this is another sort of leaf in the gruesome nature of the ISIS and the religious right-wing group. The thing which is, it keeps shocking people, but the reality is that this is what's happening under the right-wing Islamic movement. What ISIS is doing is actually openly using it as a means of terrorizing the population, because that's why when ISIS was arriving in parts of Iraq, all the soldiers started running away, because they want to use this as a means of terror to establish themselves, and that's what they're doing.
And it also shows, I mean, the very anti-woman nature of this movement. One of its fundamental basis is being misogynist and anti-woman. And we must remember that, the real lives are involved here. 2,500 women have been taken as female slaves, and there are over 4,500 women missing.
And that's why when in Kobani, the declaration in support of women's rights is written up, the word is saying to ISIS and the likes that, we defend that position, defend women's rights, and that's the alternative. Any alternative that wants to have a humane, society in Middle East or anywhere else, it must have a woman's right at its core.
I mean, on these two issues, when you look at the CIA's torture and what ISIS is doing, you can see that both of them try to say that they've got the moral high ground. Neither of them really do. And in a sense, it is the fight that's taking place in many countries, from Iran to Iraq and also here in Europe, for secularism, for equality, for women's rights, that has the moral high ground. Tell us what you think about the program. Do get in touch with us. Send us videos, email us, contact us. Thank you for all your comments so far. We really enjoy receiving them. We hope you enjoyed this week's program, and until next week, we hope you have a lovely week. Bye.